She sent one last text message that nobody who loved her could ever forget. "I love you. I feel kind of weird. I don't know what to expect tomorrow. You've never done anything like this for me before, and I feel a little nervous." Those words came from a wife, a mother of 2 little girls, a nurse who had spent her entire career on the front lines of other people's worst days, calming frightened patients as they woke up from surgery. She had no idea that the man reassuring her back, telling her it was no big deal, that he just wanted to finally be romantic for once, was, according to investigators, quietly finishing the final details of a plan that would end her life within 24 hours. By the next night, she would be gone. Her body would be found in the middle of a dark suburban road, and it would take investigators more than a year, dozens of search warrants, and one hidden phone nobody knew existed to prove exactly what really happened to her. Before we go any further, if stories like this keep you up at night wondering how something so calculated could hide behind something so ordinary, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Brian's Criminal Unmasking, because this case only gets darker from here, and you will not want to miss how it finally cracked open after 17 months of silence. Let's slow down for a moment, though, because to understand how devastating this case is, you have to understand who Linda actually was before any of this happened. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't a name in a headline. This was a woman who built her entire identity around taking care of other people. She was born in the middle of October 1989 in Miami, Florida, the kind of kid teachers remember decades later because she barely had to study to remember everything she read. Friends and family have described her memory as almost photographic, the sort of gift that made schoolwork feel effortless when it was anything but for everyone around her. That mind, paired with a relentless work ethic that apparently never let up, carried her through high school and into a full academic scholarship at the University of Miami, where she earned a degree in health science. Most people with that kind of intellect might have drifted toward research or medicine or something behind a desk. Linda didn't. She wanted to be at the bedside. She wanted to be the person a frightened patient saw first when they opened their eyes. So she became a nurse. In 2015, while working at Larkin Hospital, she crossed paths with a medical resident named John. Co-workers who watched it happen say there was an instant connection, the kind 2 people notice in each other before either of them is willing to admit it out loud. It didn't take long. They married in April of 2016, and shortly after they settled into a life together in Wellington, a quiet, tree-lined, family-oriented community out in Palm Beach County, the kind of place people move to specifically because they want to raise children there. 2 daughters followed, Madison and Olivia, and by every outward measure, Linda had built exactly the life she had worked so hard for. A husband who was also a physician, 2 little girls, a career that kept climbing. By late 2024, she was working in the post-anesthesia care unit at Wellington Regional Medical Center, a job that isn't for everyone. That unit is where patients wake up from surgery disoriented, sometimes frightened, sometimes in pain, not entirely sure where they are or what's happening to them. It takes a very specific kind of steadiness to be good at that job. The ability to stay calm when someone else can't, to explain things gently, to notice the small signs that something is wrong before it becomes an emergency. Linda was good at it. She was so good, in fact, that she had just accepted an advanced nursing position at the Cleveland Clinic, one of the most respected hospital systems in the country, set to begin that December. On paper, in every way her family and co-workers could see, everything about her life was moving forward and upward at the same time. Underneath that surface, though, something else entirely was happening. And this is the part of the story that changes everything. Because for nearly 2 years, hidden completely from her husband, hidden from her own mother, hidden from almost everyone in her life who thought they knew her, Linda had been carrying on a secret affair. It began around 2022, with a fellow nurse from that very same post-anesthesia unit, a co-worker who saw her every single shift, who worked beside her caring for the same patients, who knew the rhythms of her job because he lived them too. His name was Rene. He was 38 years old, married, and a father himself. Two people who spent every working hour caring gently for the most vulnerable patients in the building were, off the clock, deep in a relationship that neither of their spouses knew existed. Now, infidelity on its own is not rare, and it is not by itself dangerous. People make painful choices in relationships every single day, and most of the time, however messy or heartbreaking those choices are, nobody ends up dead in the middle of a road. What makes this story different, what makes it worth sitting with, isn't the affair itself. It's the elaborate, almost professional-grade machinery, both of them built specifically to hide it. This wasn't two people being careless and getting caught. This was two people actively, deliberately engineering a system to keep their secret airtight for years. Rene's wife tracked his location in real time through a family location-sharing app called Life 360. The same kind of app millions of families use every day to check in on each other, to make sure teenagers got to school, to make sure a spouse made it home safely. It's built for peace of mind. Rene turned it into a tool for deception. Whenever he wanted to slip away and see Linda without leaving a digital trail behind him, he would simply leave his real tracked phone sitting on his desk inside his office at Delray Medical Center. The app would keep pinging that same location for hours at a time, painting a perfectly convincing picture that he had never left the building, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Meanwhile, he'd carry a second secret device with him, a phone his wife never knew existed, to communicate with Linda and coordinate their time together. Day after day, message after message on an encrypted messaging app, the two of them carried on a relationship that existed almost entirely in the shadows of their real lives, built and maintained with the same careful precision either of them might use organizing medication schedules on a hospital floor. That instinct for covering tracks, for building systems specifically designed to fool the people closest to them, is the thread that runs through absolutely everything that happened next. Because on the night Linda disappeared, that same instinct didn't go away. If anything, it sharpened into something far more dangerous. So let's walk through that night together, hour by hour, almost minute by minute, the way investigators eventually pieced it together using surveillance footage from two different hospitals, cell tower data pulled from 3 separate devices, and a vehicle's own internal computer system that quietly recorded far more than anyone involved ever expected it to. At around 6:30 in the evening, security cameras at Delray Medical Center captured Rene walking out of the building toward his Honda Accord. He was wearing dark, compact-soled shoes that night, a detail that seems almost meaningless on its own. Background noise in a grainy security clip nobody would think twice about. It is not meaningless. Because later, when detectives sat him down and asked him directly what time he left work that evening, he told them, without hesitation, that he didn't leave until 11 o'clock at night. The footage said otherwise. It showed him gone hours earlier than he claimed. And that single, seemingly small lie would become one of the very first threads investigators pulled on. The first sign that the story he was telling and the story the evidence was telling were two completely different things. Less than an hour after that, at 7:23 in the evening, Linda left her own home. She borrowed her husband's Chevrolet Tahoe, the family's larger vehicle, and told him she was heading out to have dinner with friends to celebrate her belated 35th birthday. There was no reason for him to doubt her. Why would there be? She'd mentioned dinner plans. She'd gotten dressed up for the occasion, wearing a red dress and black heels, the kind of outfit you put on when you actually believe you're going somewhere to be celebrated. 7 minutes later, at 7:30, the Tahoe arrived at a dim, largely abandoned parking lot on Medical Park Boulevard, outside a building where, notably, Rene used to work before he transferred to his current location. It was isolated. It was quiet. Streetlights were sparse, and investigators would later come to believe it wasn't chosen by accident. Just over 40 minutes after her arrival, at 8:12 in the evening, a photograph was taken on Linda's iPhone. It is the kind of image that makes your stomach drop the moment you understand what you're actually looking at. It shows the interior of the Tahoe with the back seats folded completely flat, transforming the rear cargo area into one long, open, flat surface. the kind of configuration you'd use to haul furniture or camping gear or something far too large to fit any other way. Laid across that flattened surface were medical-grade absorbent sheets, the exact type used in hospitals to catch and contain heavy volumes of bodily fluid during surgery or trauma care, positioned alongside a custom-printed birthday blanket that read, "Happy birthday, hope your birthday is out of this world." The very same blanket he had described to her hours earlier in that reassuring text message meant to calm her nerves. Investigators would later determine that those medical absorption sheets weren't grabbed on impulse from some nearby supply closet in a moment of panic. They had been deliberately sourced from a hospital setting and brought along in advance. Someone had planned this. Someone had thought through the logistics of it the way you'd plan a medical procedure, not the way anyone plans a birthday surprise. Almost 2 hours after that photograph was taken, at 9:59 in the evening, security cameras caught the Tahoe pulling away from the medical park and disappearing into the night. From that point forward, cell tower records tell a very specific story. 2 devices traveling together in near-perfect synchronization. Linda's own phone and a hidden burner device connected to Rene, moving south along a major roadway known as US 441, and then turning east onto a quiet residential street called Lyons Road. 19 minutes later, at 10:18 at night, multiple frantic 911 calls began flooding in, describing a woman lying face down in the middle of a suburban road, bleeding heavily, unmoving. When first responders arrived in that quiet Lake Worth neighborhood, lights and sirens cutting through what should have been an ordinary quiet evening for the families sleeping in the houses nearby, they found Linda's body roughly 50 feet from the parked Tahoe. The vehicle itself was still running, engine idling, doors shut, headlights on, as though its driver had simply stepped out for a moment and would be right back. Except for one glaring detail that didn't fit the picture at all. The front driver's side tire was completely flat. At first glance, to anyone arriving on scene without the full context, it looked exactly like what it had been carefully designed to look like. A woman pulling over on a dark residential street because of sudden car trouble, stepping out to check her tire only to be struck by a passing driver who never even slowed down. Her own phone was found 25 feet away in the middle of the road, its flashlight app still switched on and glowing as though she had been using it to see what was wrong with the tire, or perhaps to try to signal for help in what turned out to be some of the final moments of her life. It was, by every measure, a convincing scene. Investigators would soon prove it was also, down to nearly every detail, completely staged. If you're still watching at this point, I want you to drop a comment below with the words, "I'm still here." I genuinely want to see who is following this case all the way through to the end, because Brian's criminal unmasking exists for people who actually want the full story, not the surface-level version. And what forensic investigators uncovered next is exactly where this case stops looking like a tragic accident and starts looking like something far more calculated, far more brutal, and far more deliberate. That flat tire, it turns out, wasn't the result of any road hazard, any pothole, any random piece of debris on a dark street. When crime scene technicians examined it closely, they found a metal screw embedded directly into the sidewall of the tire. Not the kind of puncture you'd get from simply driving over something in the road, but the kind of damage consistent with deliberate sabotage, placed there by someone who wanted that tire to fail at a very specific place and a very specific time. Then there were Linda's shoes, the heels of her black dress shoes, the ones she'd put on hours earlier believing she was heading out for her own birthday celebration, were completely ground down and flattened along the bottom. The kind of wear pattern investigators associate with feet being dragged across pavement, not with someone walking normally on their own 2 feet. And her back was coated in tar and road debris, consistent with having been pulled or dragged rather than having fallen or stumbled on her own. Piecing these details together, investigators concluded that Linda had been severely beaten inside the vehicle itself, driven to that quiet residential street while already grievously injured, and then physically pulled from the Tahoe and left in the middle of the road in a position designed to resemble a hit-and-run collision. There's more, and this next part is where the timeline circles back to Rene directly. Just before midnight that same night, surveillance cameras at Delray Medical Center picked him back up, walking into the building wearing the same dark, compact-soled shoes captured on camera hours earlier that evening. 6 minutes after midnight, he's seen on camera again, walking back out toward his car. But on his way out, he pauses near a waste bin for exactly 16 seconds. When he reappears fully on camera moments later, he is wearing a completely different pair of shoes. Light gray instead of dark. Those original dark shoes were never recovered by investigators. Not in his car, not in his home, not anywhere. They simply vanished, along with, apparently, whatever evidence they might have carried. The official autopsy confirmed in clinical, unavoidable terms what the crime scene had already strongly suggested. Linda's death was ruled a homicide caused by blunt force trauma to her head and torso. The injuries documented were extensive and severe: a shattered skull, 4 separate large lacerations across her scalp, contusions to her brain, several broken ribs, and a punctured lung. These are not injuries typically produced by a vehicle strike on an open road. These are injuries consistent with a sustained, repeated, brutal physical assault, carried out in an enclosed space before her body was ever moved. Investigators sprayed the entire interior of the Tahoe with a chemical reagent designed to reveal even trace amounts of blood invisible to the naked eye, and what lit up under that testing told its own devastating story. Blood had soaked deeply into the vehicle's interior upholstery, seeping all the way down into the rear driver's side door speakers, embedding itself into places that would have required significant force and significant time to reach. On the door handles, blood had been smeared in patterns consistent with someone hastily attempting to wipe it away before it could be discovered. And resting in the center console, investigators found Linda's Apple Watch with blood smeared across both sides of the band. Evidence, they believed, that it had been physically torn from her wrist either during the assault itself or in its immediate aftermath. And that birthday blanket, the one captured so clearly in the 8/12 photograph, the one meant as a sweet, thoughtful, romantic gesture, the one she'd been told about in a text message meant to ease her nerves, was gone. Completely missing from the vehicle when investigators processed it. But when they later executed a search warrant at Rene's home, they found something almost as damning in its own quiet way. Stacks of the exact same brand of medical absorption sheets, identical in type and packaging to the ones photographed laid out beneath her that night, sitting in his house as though nothing about them was unusual at all. For more than a year after Linda's death, the investigation moved slowly and methodically, the way major homicide cases often do when so much of the evidence is circumstantial, and the full timeline has to be reconstructed one small piece at a time. From the very beginning, Rene told police he only owned 2 phones, his personal phone and his work-issued phone. It was a simple story, a believable one. And for a while it held. Then, in January of 2026, more than a year after the murder, digital forensic specialists uncovered something Rene had apparently forgotten to account for entirely: a third, previously unknown device, a prepaid burner phone, registered under a completely fabricated name, purchased specifically, investigators believe, to keep this exact secret hidden. Through hospital Wi-Fi connection logs, specialists were able to trace that burner phone's usage patterns and match them directly back to Rene, tying the anonymous device to a real person for the first time. Once investigators had that device identified and confirmed, they went back through the original cell tower data from the night of the murder with fresh eyes, and there it was, plain as day. That exact burner phone had been moving in near-perfect synchronization with Linda's phone for the entire night, from the isolated parking lot on Medical Park Boulevard all the way to the residential street where her body was ultimately found. There was one more piece of the cover-up that eventually fell apart under close scrutiny, and it's almost unbelievable how it happened. Just over 2 weeks after the murder, in mid-November of 2024, Rene walked into an AT&T retail store and purchased a brand-new Samsung Galaxy phone. When detectives later asked him directly about his previous device, the phone that held the entire history of his communications with Linda, He told them he had simply lost it, that it was gone, nowhere to be found. But store surveillance footage from that exact visit, pulled months later by investigators, showed him walking into the store that day, still holding his old phone in his hand. The very device he would go on to claim was missing. That old phone, which contained the complete message history between the two of them, was never recovered. Investigators believe it was deliberately destroyed or hidden somewhere. It will likely never be found. But in the end, it didn't matter, because that same conversation history had also been backed up and preserved separately on Linda's own recovered iPhone, sitting safely in evidence the entire time, waiting to tell its half of the story. Piecing together an investigation of this scale took an extraordinary amount of sustained, painstaking work. 17 months, from the night Linda died to the morning her killer was finally arrested. More than 50 separate search warrants, each one built on the last. Location data pulled from the Life 360 app that was originally meant to protect a marriage, not expose an affair. Information extracted directly from the Tahoe's own infotainment and navigation system, which had quietly logged more of that night's movements than anyone involved ever imagined. Hospital keycard logs that placed specific people in specific hallways at specific times, cross-referenced against every claim either of them had made to police. On March 10th of 2026, all of it came together. Rene was arrested in Miami and charged with first-degree murder with a deadly weapon, along with tampering with physical evidence. He was denied bond and has remained in custody since. For Linda's mother, Adina, the arrest finally brought something close to closure, though by her own account, never quite complete peace. How could it? She didn't hold back her feelings about the man accused of taking her daughter from her, calling him, in the plainest and most honest terms, an animal. And even in the depths of that grief, even while sitting with the full weight of everything that had been uncovered, she made a point of publicly reaffirming her love and support for John, Linda's husband, the father left behind to raise their two young daughters, Madison and Olivia, largely on his own. In Linda's memory, her family established a permanent nursing scholarship fund at the University of Miami, the very same university that gave her the education and the foundation that shaped her entire career from the very beginning. A way of making sure that somewhere down the line, in some future nursing student who will never get the chance to meet her, a piece of who Linda was keeps moving forward. There's something particularly haunting about this case that's worth sitting with before we close it out. Linda spent her entire professional life reading rooms, calming frightened people, noticing the small signs that something was wrong before it turned into something catastrophic. It was, in many ways, exactly what her instincts told her the night before she died, when she sent that text saying she felt weird, that she didn't know what to expect, that she felt a little nervous. Her instincts were right. She simply had no way of knowing just how right they were, or that the person reassuring her back was, according to everything investigators would later uncover, already moving pieces into place. This case is a reminder of how much can be hidden behind an ordinary text message, an ordinary night out for a birthday dinner, an ordinary romantic gesture, and how far modern investigators can now reach into the digital shadows to pull the truth back out. One cell tower ping, one surveillance clip, one forgotten phone at a time. It took 17 months, it took 50 warrants, but in the end, the truth did not stay buried. If this story affected you the way it affected all of us putting it together here at Brian's Criminal Unmasking, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a case like this one, drop a like on your way out, and leave a comment telling us what part of this story shook you the most. We'll see you in the next one.